The world awoke to a new reality on February 24, 2022. It was a day that would forever alter the course of history, a day that marked the beginning of a brutal and unprovoked conflict. Russian forces, in a shocking display of aggression, moved swiftly and decisively. The scale and speed of the invasion caught many off guard, launched a full-scale invasion of Ukraine. The sight of Russian military convoys crossing the border was a stark reminder of the fragility of peace in our world. Explosions rocked major cities as tanks rolled across the border. The sounds of war echoed through the streets, a grim symphony of destruction and chaos. The peace that Europe had painstakingly built since World War II was shattered in an instant. Decades of diplomacy and cooperation were undone in a matter of hours. The initial shock quickly gave way to fear and uncertainty. Families huddled in bomb shelters, unsure of what the future held. Ukrainians, caught off guard but not broken, faced a stark choice: flee or fight. The resilience of the Ukrainian people was put to the ultimate test. Many chose the latter, taking up arms to defend their homeland against a much larger and better equipped enemy. Volunteers from all walks of life joined the fight, united by a common cause. The world watched in disbelief and horror, witnessing the outbreak of a major conflict in the heart of Europe. News channels broadcasted the grim reality of war into living rooms across the globe. The invasion was not only an assault on Ukraine's sovereignty, but also a direct attack on the principles of democracy and international law. Protests erupted worldwide, with people standing in solidarity with Ukraine. It was a stark reminder of the fragility of peace and the ever-present threat of authoritarianism. The world was reminded that the fight for freedom and democracy is never truly over. As the world grappled with the implications of this conflict, one thing became clear: Ukraine would not fall without a fight. The spirit of the Ukrainian people, their determination and courage, became a beacon of hope and resistance in the face of tyranny. From the outset, Ukrainian resistance was fierce and determined. Ordinary citizens, inspired by the courage of their elected leaders, took up arms to defend their homes and families. They formed territorial defense units, engaging in street-to-street combat with Russian forces. The Ukrainian military, though outnumbered and outgunned, mounted a spirited defense, inflicting heavy casualties on the invading army. They effectively utilized their knowledge of the terrain and employed innovative tactics, including drone warfare, to slow down the Russian advance. Stories of Ukrainian bravery and resilience quickly spread around the world, capturing the imagination of people far beyond the conflict zone. The Ukrainian people, united in their determination to resist, became a symbol of courage and defiance in the face of overwhelming aggression. As the war raged on, Ukrainian cities faced relentless bombardment. Civilian infrastructure, including hospitals, schools, and apartment buildings, became targets in a brutal campaign of destruction. Mariupol, Kharkiv, and Chernihiv were reduced to rubble, bearing witness to the horrors of modern warfare. Millions of Ukrainians were forced to flee their homes, becoming refugees in their own country, or seeking safety abroad. Families were torn apart, their lives upended by the conflict. The United Nations estimated that over 10 million Ukrainians had been displaced, creating one of the largest humanitarian crises since World War II. The human cost of the war was staggering. Thousands of civilians, including children, lost their lives in the crossfire. The physical and psychological scars left by the conflict would take years, if not generations, to heal. As 2024 approached, the war in Ukraine showed no signs of abating. The conflict, which had begun in 2014 with the annexation of Crimea and escalated dramatically in 2022, had now entered its third year of full-scale warfare. The toll on both military and civilian lives was staggering, with countless families torn apart and cities reduced to rubble. Despite international condemnation and crippling economic sanctions, Russia continued its relentless assault, albeit with less intensity than in the initial months. The sanctions had severely impacted the Russian economy, leading to widespread protests and dissent within the country. However, the Kremlin remained steadfast, driven by a mix of strategic interests and nationalistic fervor. The conflict had morphed into a war of attrition, with both sides dug in along a sprawling front line. Trench warfare reminiscent of World War I had become the norm, with soldiers enduring harsh conditions and constant danger. The front line stretched for hundreds of miles, from the northern borders near Belarus to the southern coast along the Black Sea. The Donbas region in eastern Ukraine remained a key battleground, with fierce fighting raging for control of strategic cities. Towns like Bakhmut and Mariupol, had become symbols of resistance and resilience, with both sides vying for control of these critical locations. The urban warfare in these areas was particularly brutal, with buildings and infrastructure suffering extensive damage. The southern regions, including Kherson and Zaporizhzhia, also witnessed intense clashes as Ukrainian forces attempted to liberate occupied territories. The strategic importance of these regions could not be overstated, as control over them would significantly impact the overall dynamics of the conflict. Ukrainian forces, bolstered by international support, made significant gains but faced stiff resistance. The international community continued to provide military and humanitarian aid to Ukraine, but the flow of support was inconsistent and often fell short of what was needed. Countries around the world grappled with their own political and economic challenges, which sometimes hindered their ability to offer sustained assistance. Nonetheless, the aid that did arrive was crucial in bolstering Ukraine's defenses and providing relief to its beleaguered population. The war had exposed the limitations of international institutions and the challenges of maintaining a united front against aggression in a multipolar world. Diplomatic efforts at the United Nations and other forums often resulted in stalemates, with major powers unable to reach a consensus. Meanwhile, protests against the war erupted in cities across the globe, reflecting widespread public discontent and the desire for a peaceful resolution. The conflict in Ukraine had become a stark reminder of the complexities and perils of modern geopolitics. Stories of loss, tales of courage. Amidst the devastation and despair, stories of human resilience and courage shone through. Countless individuals, both Ukrainian and foreign, risked their lives to help others. Doctors and nurses worked tirelessly in bombed-out hospitals, treating the wounded under constant threat of attack. Volunteers braved shelling and gunfire to deliver food, water, and medical supplies to those trapped in besieged cities. Journalists risking their lives to report from the front lines provided a crucial window into the realities of the war, ensuring that the world did not look away from the suffering. There were also stories of extraordinary bravery on the battlefield. Ukrainian soldiers, inspired by a deep sense of patriotism and a fierce determination to defend their homeland, fought with unwavering courage against a larger and better-equipped enemy. The war in Ukraine sent shockwaves far beyond the immediate conflict zone. The reverberations of this conflict were felt in every corner of the globe, affecting not just the immediate region, but also the international community at large. Global energy markets were thrown into turmoil as sanctions on Russian oil and gas exports led to soaring prices and supply disruptions. The energy crisis was not just a matter of higher prices at the pump, it had far-reaching implications for industries and households alike. Factories faced shutdowns, and families struggled to pay their energy bills, leading to widespread economic distress. Countries heavily reliant on Russian energy were forced to scramble for alternative sources, leading to economic uncertainty and political instability. Governments had to make tough decisions, balancing the need for energy security with the political and economic costs of shifting to new suppliers. This scramble for energy also led to increased competition and tension among nations, further complicating the global political landscape. The conflict also exacerbated an already precarious global food crisis. The disruption of supply chains and the destruction of agricultural infrastructure in Ukraine had a domino effect, impacting food availability and prices worldwide. Ukraine, a major exporter of wheat and other grains, saw its agricultural production plummet as fields were transformed into battlegrounds. Farmers who once fed millions were now struggling to survive, and the loss of Ukrainian grain exports created a significant gap in the global food supply. Food prices soared, pushing millions more people into hunger and poverty, particularly in developing countries that relied heavily on Ukrainian imports. The crisis hit the most vulnerable populations the hardest, exacerbating existing inequalities and leading to increased social unrest in many parts of the world. The war in Ukraine had profound geopolitical consequences, reshaping alliances and accelerating global power shifts. Nations were forced to reconsider their foreign policies and alliances, leading to a realignment of global power structures. The conflict highlighted the growing rivalry between Russia and the West, raising fears of a new Cold War. The tensions between these global powers created an atmosphere of uncertainty and mistrust, reminiscent of the Cold War era, and the world watched anxiously as the situation continued to evolve. As the war entered its third year, the prospects for a negotiated settlement remained elusive. Both sides seemed entrenched in their positions, with neither willing to make the concessions necessary for a lasting peace. The international community continued its diplomatic efforts, but progress remained slow and uncertain. The human cost of the war continued to mount, with each passing day bringing more death, destruction, and displacement. The conflict had created deep divisions within Ukrainian society, leaving lasting scars on the country's social fabric. Trust between Ukraine and Russia had been shattered, making reconciliation a distant prospect. Despite the immense challenges and the uncertain future, the Ukrainian people's spirit remained unbroken. They continued to display remarkable resilience, determination, and hope, even in the face of unimaginable adversity. Their unwavering belief in their right to freedom and self-determination had inspired the world. The war in Ukraine was a stark reminder of the fragility of peace and the importance of defending democratic values. It was a testament to the human spirit's ability to endure even the darkest of times. The conflict also underscored the interconnectedness of the world and the need for international cooperation in addressing global challenges. As individuals living in a world grappling with the consequences of this war, we have a moral obligation to stay informed, to empathize with the suffering of the Ukrainian people, and to support efforts to alleviate their plight. We can donate to reputable humanitarian organizations providing aid to those affected by the conflict. We can amplify the voices of Ukrainians, sharing their stories and raising awareness about the realities of the war. We can advocate for policies that promote peace, diplomacy, and respect for international law. And most importantly, we can hold on to hope, for it is in the face of darkness that the light of human compassion shines brightest.